the World Healing Tour movement with your host, Noah Crane. Heal yourself, heal the world. Hello, welcome to the World Healing Tour podcast, where our mission is to help you heal yourself so you can heal the world. Hello, my name is Noah Crane. Each week, we will bring you tips and tools and inspire you to live your most empowered and joy-filled life. I'm also the author of the book, The Grass is Greenest Where I Am. My book teaches you to live in your own love and light and share your own unique gifts with the world, because we're all unique. We all have something special in this world. And through my journey of where I felt really fearful, like I wasn't good enough, like I was stupid, through that journey, through that pain, through those challenges, I was able to learn more about myself and become who I am today. So it's that journey, and I help you find the path of least resistance. How can you learn to nurture every moment and every day without making it wrong and bad? And how can you make your life easier, make it more flowing, right? To flow more into the things you want instead of making it difficult and have to be in that place where you're always fighting and resisting. And that's why I wanted to share this message with you. That's why we bring incredible people into the podcast to be able to also pour into you, into your life, because through other people's challenges, we get to become stronger and learn so much about our own journey and about ourselves. My guest today, I'm really excited about. His name is Mark Turnipseed. He's a coach, model, entrepreneur, co-founder of Hello 42, a beautiful skincare line, best-selling Amazon author of an incredible book called My Suicide Race. After 3 attempted suicides in 1 week, Mark started training for an Iron Triathlon. As a trained mental health counselor, Mark started blogging about his journey. He realized that God was using him through his own struggles to help other people. Through his fitness, wellness, and faith, he faced and overcame his fears. Now a wellness expert and a faith-based life coach, Mark uses his techniques of mind, body, and spirit to help others achieve inner bliss and elevate their lives. Mark, welcome to the World Healing Tour podcast. I'm so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Noah. This is a great opportunity, and I love sharing about this type of stuff. I mean, just hearing your intro, everybody needs to hear some of this good tidbits of knowledge on a daily.
Yes, thank you so much. We all do. And, let's start with you've had a lot of struggles and a lot of fears that you had to come into as well. You had to overcome your own fears. What were the main fears that were in your way? What was the struggle that got you to a place where you thought, like, I need to end this all?
Well, let's be honest. I mean, when it comes down to fears, I think you summed it up pretty well there. It's the fear of not being enough. I mean, that's going to drive anybody to the brink of suicide. If you continually go through, the cognitive structuring of I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, right? And so that was ultimately my biggest fear all the time, was I'm not enough. And see, what happened in my life very early on in my life was I went through some trauma. I went through the child sexual trauma where I began to believe at about 6 years old that I wasn't enough.
Can you talk about that a little bit, the child sexual trauma?
Yeah, well, I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church, right? And when I was molested by my cousin, it was an older male cousin, and he kind of taught me that I was supposed to be the girl in the relationship, that I
And you
developed...
were 6 years old at the time?
Yes, yeah, and I developed guilt. And that guilt, because it was not parallel with the way of Christ, the way of the Christian church that I was living in. The guilt led to me identifying with the shame. It led for me becoming a shameful person. And when I'm a shameful person, I'm never going to be enough, because now my identity in and of itself is by, just naturally, it's just not enough, right?
Yeah, so he had such an impact on you, at such a young, vulnerable age.
He didn't, trauma did.
Mm-hmm.
right? So the person actually loses all sorts of power over the individual once we accept what we go through. So as it pertains to trauma, an individual can do something wrong, but it's not on that individual. That individual is not to blame, and they're never to judge, and they're always to be forgiven. The only way to do that is by taking the power out of them, because what they were acting on is trauma and chemical too.
Oh yeah, so it's that vicious cycle
Yes.
that he was probably abused too as a
Yep,
child,
exactly.
and it passes on, and that's why when you come talk about forgiveness, that is so important to be able to break the cycles of hate and anger and trauma and self and blaming, right?
It's the only thing that sets
Yeah.
you free
Yes, yes.
from trauma like that, from trauma from other people.
And
Now,
how long was that going on for?
it was in my childhood, and I barely remember.
Okay.
A couple years, and a couple instances, but I
Was it something that you like kind of forgot about?
yeah,
remembered
and
later?
the bigger thing was it just fell into my identity, and it fell into a mindset that I was always wrong. Right. And so although the trauma existed, I think it was the continued mindset and the lack of conversation in my family and in my community and society about what does it mean when you start having same-sex attraction. Right.
And you were keeping it inside.
I was
too.
just keeping it
You weren't
inside.
saying anything.
I sure wasn't saying anything, because what I saw on the outside was if I did, then I would go through some serious consequences. I remember in school, kids getting extremely bullied just for having a lisp, just for having feminine characteristics, right? And I was so scared of not fitting in. I was so scared, again, of not being enough.
Yeah, that is a huge thing that can impact your life, right?
Yeah.
To feel like you're not enough, and you're kind of, do you almost see yourself as like an oddball, like you just didn't fit in?
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the very first time that I walked into elementary school, I remember looking around and being like, they all have it figured out, and I don't. Why do they have it figured out? What instruction book did they get that I didn't get?
So was that constant comparison of yourself to others?
Yes.
And did that cause isolation within yourself?
Extreme isolation. Extreme isolation. Yeah. Because if you're on the island of yourself and you're thinking about yourself, you're also thinking about how you need to appear and how you need to present, and you can't really be present there. And that's why I always pull my thing back to faith, right? Because that's the only thing that sets me free, is instead of paying attention to how I'm supposed to present, who I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to identify is, just identify myself as a beautiful son of God. Right? As a son of God that has a mission, has a purpose, and has fate already outlined for me. And all I have to do is take the next step with a smile, being kind to other people. And then all of a sudden I get to lose all that pressure. Right? But until I can identify as such, I can't be free. Until I can identify with something that sets me free. The first thing that I actually ended up identifying with that finally helped set me free was, one, it was an alcoholic. When I fully recognized that I had become an alcoholic, that was an identity that was able to help me start shifting. But another identity that really helped me was identifying myself as a triathlete. So when I started doing triathlon later on in the story, that's when I was finally able to overcome and start to face the fears and face the challenges and lean into the struggle. Because ultimately what it was, my conflict in sexuality is really just a little bit of discomfort that you're withholding. Like the only reason why as a kid, I didn't talk about it with my mom and dad was just because I was experiencing a little bit of discomfort. And had I known that discomfort was okay to go through, right, throughout my childhood, if a man starts feeling uncomfortable, he toughens up. If a man starts to cry, he holds it back, right? You're not allowed to feel those feelings. You run from those feelings. So, of course, having a little bit of discomfort over the fact that, Mom, Dad, I'm experiencing these feelings, that is going to hold me back from participating in the openness and vulnerability that's going to allow me to eventually heal. So it's a big systems problem. Yes, the trauma occurred, but y'all, we all go through trauma on a daily basis. So I'm not going to blame that person. And if you are blaming that person, you're going to stay stuck and rooted in that trauma. right? It's about you got to release that person. You got to find a way to release that person.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful and so well said, Mark, because it's so true. So many people hold on to that trauma. They can't forgive, and especially somebody like sexual abuse. That's something that really can shape your life in so many ways, and it's easy to go and blame it was because of this. Have you been able to make peace with that cousin?
Peace is something that's always kind of vacillating. I think back and forth. That's been a challenge for sure. But it hasn't really like impeded, and it's been an open, thing. It's been an open dialogue.
Have you confronted him ever?
I wonder if peace is, something that can even ever be ascertained in a victim type relationship, right? Or if it ever really needs to be.
Right.
But I do believe that forgiveness can be.
That's a really good way of putting it,
Yeah.
That's great. So there was a lot of struggle, and that struggle, that inner struggle of the shame and the guilt and all those things, not feeling good enough, brought you to a place where you wanted to end your life, and actually tried to end your life 3 times in 1 week. What drove you to that extreme?
Well, let's dial it back, because actually I did try to kill myself 3 times in 1 week in my 30s. But it had been a long time that I had been thinking about suicide. Since I was about 7 years old, I started thinking about suicide. Before I even knew what the word suicide was, I started thinking about it, and I was like obsessive about dying.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I started to recognize that really what it was is I wanted to escape the now. I didn't want to be here. I didn't like this life, right? It was, and largely that was because I saw it as hopeless. Like there was no way that I was ever going to measure up. There was no way that I was ever going to be enough. That led me, looking down at myself, I thought that I should be a girl, right? I was like, I will never be enough. I'll never be enough of a man. I'll never be enough of a human being. So I needed to be something different. So I was suicidal at a very, very early age. And then my neighbor committed suicide I was probably like 8 years old, and then I definitely couldn't stop thinking about it. It was always in my head.
So it was programmed very early into your
brain.
brain.
And then I had a friend commit suicide too at like a ridiculously early age, at like 11 years old. And that made, so I was kind of surrounded by it. And so like I saw it as a way out, right? And I
escape.
I'm nervous because that's so much more accessible now, kids being exposed to so many different stories all the time. They start to see that might be a way out.
If people only knew that by working through your traumas and issues, you can actually free yourself and come to a different place where you don't see life as such a bad place to be, where you could use your, all your obstacles and your traumas as a place to grow from and empower yourself on the journey.
Yes.
And I think when you're at that place where you want to kill yourself, you don't see anything past your problems. You have those blind spots on that you can only see. You can't see the bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, so all my life it's been kind of a thought in the back of my head. Like when stuff just isn't going right, there's been a thought that's like go commit suicide. So it's kind of always been there, and I've never been able to really understand it until recently. But it was always there. And so when I got to the point when I was 30 years old, and I had those 3 suicide attempts where it really bubbled up, at that point I had been 3 years sober off of heroin. And before that, I had been in a 5-year heroin habit. And now I had been 3 years sober off of heroin. But I was still living in a very insular and isolated way, right? I had moved out. I was living out in Montana. I was a ski bum. I was basically, keeping my life extremely, extremely small. And I knew inside that I was meant for so much more. But there was always that little thing inside that was like, you're not enough for that. You have those dreams. You've had those dreams since you were a child. You're not enough for that. You'll never be enough for that. So I stayed
working a
little ski shop just so I could ski and drink.
And you knew you were playing safe.
And I knew I was playing safe.
And small, right?
And small, right? And yeah, so I love the story of Jonah and the whale, right? When Jonah was told by God he was supposed to go out and do some sort of mission, and then he goes, "No, God, I'm not enough. I'm going to stay here on my fishing boat." And then the whale puts him in the belly. Right. And that's exactly what I felt like when I was up there. Right. I was in my drugs. I was in my booze. I was in my depression. I was in my whale's belly. And God's like, just get out and go do the mission that I had for you, which is helping other people with your life, with your story, and like use yourself because you have a gift. And I didn't see any of that, but we're built with that inside of us. That's why we have the dreams that we have. That's why we have the passions and the aspirations, and that's why we have the strengths that we have. And so really learning to look at those things can help anybody, right? It can help really when you are thinking that the grass is greener on the other side because you're experiencing these challenges and stuff. If you start concentrating on your strengths, right, in those situations, then you find these things to be grateful for no matter what you're going through.
Yeah, I love that. And you stop running away from yourself.
Yeah.
Which we have to stop. All right, Mark, this is such a great conversation. We have a great event coming up, World Healing Tour 2.
Woo-woo.
Yay, October 20th, 2022. And we're going to go to commercial for 1 minute, and we'll be right back with Mark. World Healing Tour 2, 2024, October 20th, at the Wyndham Hotel in Boca Raton. We are looking for vendors, for sponsors, for speakers. If you want to be a part of this, go to noahcrane.com or click the link below. Great, and we are back. So Mark, how has gratitude helped you overcome a lot of those fears? It sounds like you were able to connect to that gratitude. And I also write in my book a lot about gratitude and the flow of gratitude, because I believe, when we're fighting, when we're resisting, like I said in the beginning, we're bumping walls, right? But when we're grateful, even just think of the word, we're flowing, we're moving forward, we're not stuck. So was that something that helped you in your life to be able to go to where you wanted to get out of that state?
Yeah, I think gratitude is a very, very essential component to any success, right? If you're facing any sort of storm, there's always something to be grateful for. And that is actually the case. A lot of people can come up with all sorts of ideas and historical, thinking, thought experiments where they put themselves, like, say, in the Holocaust, and there's no hope, right? Well, there actually is. There actually is, and there's things that you can still be grateful for no matter what you're facing. God gives our mind an extremely powerful ability to be able to tap into gratitude no matter what we're going through, and to be able to remove ourselves even from entire different situations and put ourselves in a place where we're not even feeling pain. And if that in and of itself isn't something to be grateful for, no matter what you're going through, then I don't know what is. That in and of itself, if you start becoming grateful for something like that, you're becoming grateful for just who you are. You're becoming grateful for the miracle that you are.
Oh, I love that.
And once we become grateful for the miracle of who we are, there's no way that we can't look out and say that person's a miracle and I need to love them just like I love myself.
Yeah, I love all your wisdom, Mark. It's so beautiful, and the way you speak is so eloquent. But yeah, it's that mirror, it's that beauty that you see in yourself. So that's why the inner work is so important.
Yeah.
Because if you don't see the beauty in yourself, how can I see it in you, right? Because when people always tell me, oh, I love this about you, or you exude this, I'm like, well, thank you for being my mirror.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't see who I am if it wasn't within them as well.
And let's remember, with gratitude, it starts as a practice and as a discipline, but we do practices and discipline so that we can become something better, right? And so with gratitude, it may start as a list, and it may start as very superficial things. I'm grateful for my breakfast. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for my girlfriend, right? But with time, it's all about developing a heart of gratitude. And it's when we can finally find a heart of gratitude that then what ends up happening is when we slip out of gratitude, we have symptoms of discontent. We have symptoms of anger and frustration and anxiety. And then we recognize, oh, all I need to do is go back to the heart of gratitude.
Yeah, I love that so much. I love that so much. The heart of gratitude. Yeah, because you have to exhume it.
Yeah.
It's not just a word. It's a being, right?
It's a being. It's a state of being.
Yeah, it's a way of being every day.
Yeah.
It's
Same with honesty,
Yes.
integrity, any of those big value words that we talk about, right?
Yes.
They're things that are a state of being.
So, yeah, I love that. And gratitude has completely changed my life as well. And I've been able to attract more of the things that I want in my life through gratitude, through who I'm being, through shining my light bright on the world and on others. People are more attracted to me and who I am. And using my voice, right, Mark? How important is it not to be afraid to use your voice? Because when I didn't feel I was good enough, I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to use my voice and shine. And we can use our voice. That's powerful.
You know, the voice is so very, very, very important because, not only, it can serve as a magical tool too, because if you're going through something inside and you let it out verbally, all of a sudden you're not going through it inside. Right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you've given it over to God at least, but you've also given it over to somebody else if somebody else has heard it. Y'all, this is exactly what needs to happen really inside of families and inside of schools is having a serious concentration on being open and vulnerable. Right? Being open and vulnerable and then having compassion and in a non-judgmental space. Because all of us are going through so many different things, and it's when we talk about them that we grow stronger through them, right? No matter how hard it is or weird it is that you're going through, somebody else is doing it, right? And then at that point, what ends up happening, Noah, is you don't feel alone. Literally, guys, right when I started living a life of openness and vulnerability. When I started my podcast, when I started my blog, when I sat down in a coffee shop, right? And I wrote about wanting to masturbate and that making me feel guilty, right? I wrote about that and I felt so ashamed about this feeling that I was like, everybody's going to laugh at me. But that was the very first blog article that I wrote.
And people must have really resonated with that.
And people really resonated with it, but because it's just something that people go through. And really what it was I was trying to distract myself, right? Anything that would take my mind off of what God wanted me to do, which was to start blogging about my struggles and sharing my testimony with the world. Anything that was going to distract me from that was a better option. And so, masturbation or go have a drink or go skiing.
Right.
Just don't sit down and do this blog. Just don't voice what's going on inside of you. Right?
So that's amazing that you have such insight about why you were doing what you were doing.
It wasn't insight. I had no insight. I have perspective now.
Yeah.
In the time, it was survival.
Right.
So in the time, I recognized what I had recognized was, look, I've lived a certain way. My whole life, I haven't said a single thing about how I feel inside. And I'm ruining my second marriage, right? And I've never been able to make it through a marriage or relationship or anything because I'm always just stuck, right? And so it was time to make a serious life change that was completely polar opposite. And so one thing I started doing was I stopped listening to who I said that I was, and I started listening to who the people who loved me said I was, which was a worthy, strong human being, right? Who was capable of love. And that was just such a profound thing that I just it healed my heart, right? It healed my heart and it enabled me to start putting my focus onto something else. I think that was the most essential thing, is to start putting my focus on a new identity of myself.
And you did it through what others thought about you.
Yeah.
That's powerful. So
Yeah.
you were surrounding yourself with some positive people at the time.
Yeah. Changing that mindset.
That's great. And what did you have to eliminate out of your life in order to get there? How were you able to do it? You probably had some toxic people in your life as well, especially if you were doing drugs and all
You know what
those
I
things,
noticed
or
about
no?
all that
Yeah.
is you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about who comes and goes from your life so much so. We do think we do, but we really don't. All we have to do is be our authentic self, and then who's supposed to be there stays and who's not goes. The trick is actually overcoming the feelings of attachment. So that's where we think we have to take so much action in these types of relationships, because we feel like, what are we going to be like without this person? I mean, we use other people as a mirror and as an understanding of ourselves. So it's natural that that happens. It's not a bad thing to happen.
Sure.
But we've got to be able to let people go.
Yeah, and attachment, that's huge.
It's
right?
huge.
Because we do get attached to things, to habits, to all kinds of things that don't always serve our life, you know? So, how were you able to release those attachments? Was that doing more inner work on yourself, or?
Again, I think it was necessity. And so I felt at one point that since I had lived one certain way, that I had to live a completely different way. And that was also just letting go of anybody who didn't want to be part of my life, and accepting whoever wanted to come into it, as accepting them and recognizing that they all had an essential role, right?
Yes.
Because once I started living a life, what I consider a life of purpose, then I start recognizing that everybody has a role, right? We all have a role in this body of human being that can create so much good and so much love in this world. We all have such a unique and profound role.
Yes, 100%. We all have a role. We're all part of the pieces of
But
the
you can
puzzle.
only do that if you're being you.
Yes. And if you're able to heal yourself, because the whole journey is to heal yourself so you can help others heal.
And I felt like I had to share about it. I felt like it was my responsibility. So as I survived the suicide attempts, I was like, and I started doing Ironman triathlon, I started to be like, I've got to blog about this. I've got to share it with the world. I can't keep this all inside. And honestly, I didn't have, like I said, it was all perspective. Like I look back on it now and recognize what I did.
Yes.
But in the moment, I did not recognize that as insight. I just recognized it as the natural course of action. Because if I didn't do that, I felt like I was going to go back into being suicidal again.
And you were also, I would think, at your lowest low.
I was at my lowest
So at your
low.
lowest low, you do some things that you probably wouldn't do otherwise.
You try anything,
Yeah,
right? It's like
yes.
it's like if you're out in the middle of the sea, you're starting to grab for anything. And if you think inside, like I thought inside of my head, just go blog. Go to the coffee shop right now and blog about exactly what you're thinking right now. Go. And I went to the coffee shop and I wrote about how I went to the coffee shop because if I stayed home to do this, then I was going to
Do something else. That
do
was more
something else.
self-destructive and get you off the course
It was
that
more,
you wanted to go.
maybe not even self-destructive, but it was going to take me off the course, right?
In this moment, it would have been
Yeah, because
self-destructive.
masturbation in and of
it's a
itself isn't a
natural
negative thing.
No. But it was where it was taking you, because it
Yeah.
was taking you away from your purpose.
Yes,
you know?
as such with all of our behaviors and anything of the appetite, right? Eating too much, any of that can just be a distraction. I found myself today doing that. I was sitting there and there's this really important business document that I've been working on, right? And I found myself today not starting work, and instead I played my guitar for a little bit, and then right after I played my guitar, I went over to my computer, turned on my computer and go, I'm a little hungry. And I went to my kitchen, started eating. It wasn't even a meal time, and I recognized exactly what I was doing was the same exact thing that I had done very early on in my story, but now I wasn't even practicing what I preached. I was avoiding something and I was just filling my stomach, or working out or playing
Avoiding
the
the
guitar.
pain
Maybe things that are apparently even healthy, you know?
Yeah, and they're healthy, but it's also avoidance. And so, avoiding kind of like a pain point and going more towards the pleasure, which is something we do. It can be extreme, where you go to drugs and alcohol and it can be something as small as like taking us away to, do other things to take us away from what we really need to do. So it's tricky, right?
Yeah.
It's not always showing up the same way.
Now, if you could get in the growth mindset that when the discomfort comes, you just practice always like leaning into it a little bit, and just, you don't always have to stay in it, right? Lean into it just a minute and see if it's just an illusion.
Yeah, I like that. I always say humanity is always going to get in the way of who you want to be.
Yeah.
because we're human. We're going to fall off the horse. It's how fast can we get back on the horse again?
Yeah.
And that's the practice, because you're going to fall and you need to get back up, and you're going to fall and you need to get back up. And the more you can do it in a faster way, you don't stay there for too long. That's where you get more empowered and you get more productive in your life and able to move forward more easily, not be stuck so often.
Yeah. Life is almost less about success and more about failing and continuing to show up,
Right.
with a smile on your face, because it really doesn't. And that's something that you learn in Ironman triathlon. Like very rarely are you going to win a race, right? That's a big distance, and there's a lot of very fast people out there. You're not out there to win. I mean, is winning the success of the race? Like, who's defining this success? You're defining success inside of your own head, right? Now, I'm all about physical success and, money and everything like that, right? But if we're stuck and fixated on that form of success, we're never going to have actual fulfillment. And that's really what we're all actually after.
Yes, yes. Very beautifully said. We are after fulfillment. And to me, just being in the race is a success, right? Because
Yeah.
how many people really do triathlons?
Just showing up for the
Yeah.
race.
Yeah, just being there, I used to go to CrossFit and work out, or when I go do weights, I never compete with other people. I'm just like there to get my workout, to do the best I can, and to get stronger in my life. I'm not there to compete with anybody for time or how fast, because I don't want to stress myself to that level, because I'm not a professional athlete. This is not something that I don't need the gold medal. I just want to know, like, I'm doing better for me. And it's about knowing what works for you.
Now, let me ask you this, though, because I believe that competition in and of itself is a very beautiful thing, right? So in the race, I'm not saying really that I don't compete. I'm not saying that I'm not racing against other people, because I am. And that's one of the most beautiful things about the race. But here's the thing, is it doesn't matter where I finish.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter where you finish, right? Because there's going to be the next race. There's 100,000 other races going on in that very day.
Yeah.
Right?
It doesn't define you.
We become very egotistical. And I noticed that really inside of the race that there's something else more beautiful, and that's connecting to other people. So celebrating somebody else is even better than celebrating yourself. And you're only going to notice that, y'all, if you end up on an Ironman triathlon. Y'all, an Ironman triathlon is 2.4-mile swim, 11-mile bike ride, and then a marathon. Okay, so you get yourself on a marathon.
How long is the marathon?
26.2 miles.
Oh my God.
So you get yourself running on a marathon. You're about 11 to 14 hours into a day in the heat in the race, and you're still running, right? You've tried now at this point to talk yourself up, and it's not working anymore. You've lost everything. I encourage you, try to talk someone else up and watch as the energy inside of you lifts drastically. Because it's really in connecting with other people that the true magic is going to start happening. And that's ultimately why I take it all back to faith. Because if we're trying to put our experience as being the most paramount and most important thing in this life, may that be our happiness or our comforts, we're missing the bigger picture. You're missing the fact that you can change this world for the better.
It's the impact.
It's
the
the
impact we have on each other. It's
Yeah.
the impact we have on the world. It's the impact we leave behind that really, really matters. And that's what I hear. And that is consciousness.
Yeah.
That's being conscious of not just thinking I'm here and other people are here. We are all here together, and seeing ourselves as one. And your pain we're mirrors, so somebody else's pain, he needs you to give him some light and love. So it's that constant exchange of energy between us that creates the whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful about that. And how many triathlons have you done?
Six
triathlons.
full distance, the long ones. Yeah. Probably 8 or 9 of actual just triathlons.
So what made you say, from doing drugs and drinking, that I'm going to go be a triathlete? Like, where was that switch? Were you always an athlete?
I've always wanted to be an athlete, and I always wanted to be a triathlete. Well, there was a lot of different athletics that I
Yeah.
wanted to be professional in. One of them was baseball, one of them was football, one of them was track, right? But I remember in my childhood really wanted to be a triathlete at one point. When I saw somebody's tattoo, and a little Iron Man tattoo, I asked him what it was. It was a triathlon, and he was this mountain biking instructor that I really enjoyed. And so, I always kind of wanted to. Yes, I was. I've got the genetics for athletics. My father was very fit, and we were raised in sports. I didn't ever excel too much in any of them. And I did, sometime in my like teenagehood, I got into health and I got into fitness. I started working out for girls, basically working out for the muscles. And then I got into college and just started partying. And so I really lost sense of it. So I was never into really athletics, to answer your question. Now later on in my life, when I was floundering about, had lost all sense of identity, right? And I was trying to kill myself. Then I woke up from a suicide attempt, and I went to the pool at my fitness center, and I was getting out of the pool, and this guy goes, "You should do a triathlon." And I was like, "You're crazy. I could barely swim a lap. I was 230 pounds. I could barely make it across the pool." And I would go, "You're crazy." And he goes, "If I did it, you can too." And here's what happened to me in that moment was I go, well, if he did, maybe I can too. So maybe I'll give that a try. But I was instantly reminded of this man that I really admired who was a triathlete. And I go, maybe I should start trying to identify myself as such. So I went home, I signed up for a race, and the next day I was calling myself a triathlete.
That's amazing. That one person, and I call them messengers in my book, somebody who just shares a message with you to help guide you on the journey.
Yeah.
And these messengers are here to guide us. And he was obviously a messenger for you. That's why I got so excited.
Yeah.
Like, that's so cool, that you were listening to that message that he was giving to you and took it to heart. Now, here you are, 200 and something pounds. So you were very overweight at the time, right? Because
calling myself a triathlete. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, you were.
It was funny. It was
Yeah.
almost delusional, right? I would go to the gym and people would be like, "What are you doing here?" And I'll be like, "I'm a triathlete," right?
Yeah.
I hadn't ever even done a triathlon. So there was a little bit of grandiosity there. There was a little bit of delusion. But y'all, having a healthy identity probably was one of the first things that saved my life. Because here's what it did. Ultimately, is having an identity gives you a purpose with triathlon and almost everything you do, right? Having a purpose and an identity that's under some sort of discipline like triathlon gives me what I'm supposed to eat, what I'm supposed to drink, how I'm supposed to sleep, and how I'm supposed to structure my day and my fitness and my workout.
So you switched right away, like you
So I just
started
switched
researching
focus.
it. You
Yeah.
just switched focus just like that.
I switched focus because I didn't have room for the rest of it. And so that's where, with depression and anxiety, start filling your life with a whole bunch of other things based in some sort of identity like that, right? Because when I was suicidal, I do recognize that I really actually did have to kill something inside of myself. And I had to kill that and become something else. Now, it was a transformation that would take time, right? It's not just a sudden, severing. But it took about 3-year process. And when I fully did that real full Ironman, that first one, it took me 3 years to train for. That's why I called my book My Suicide Race, because I felt like I had finally killed the man who I had become because of living in my lies and trauma, and finally stepped into the person that I was meant to be.
Yeah, and
or
what I
was
love?
stepping into.
That's amazing, Mark. What I really heard in that, when you said kill something, you didn't have to kill yourself as a form of suicide. You had to just kill something inside of you, which is so important for people to differentiate between killing themselves and killing something inside of them to become who they need to be.
Look, this life is an illusion, right? And if it is an illusion and you are suicidal, then maybe there actually is a suicide that you do need to go through.
But it's not a physical suicide.
But it's not a physical suicide.
And I love that, because so many people have had physical thoughts of physical suicide, like I have to kill myself to end my pain, but they don't have to kill themselves.
Yeah.
They have to kill something inside of themselves.
And
And
all,
that's a great
yeah,
differentiation for people to understand. You didn't have to kill yourself. You learned that you need to kill something inside yourself, which gave you a different direction in your life.
yep. And all those are just feelings, and feelings are going to require some sort of action, right? So, you have to take some sort of action. So might as well start to kill an old part of yourself. That's kind of how I woke up every day.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's really, really powerful.
I would just be like, you know what? This is like what I wouldn't used to do. And so I'm going to just squash that idea, and I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to swim, even though I can't hardly make it a lap.
That's unbelievable. And you had a coach that trained you?
No,
Okay,
I
you
was
just
doing it
trained
all
yourself.
alone. Yeah, I was up
That's
in
incredible.
middle of Montana,
Wow.
little small town.
That's great. Well, I can't wait to get back to the story.
Yeah, of course.
We're going to take a quick commercial right now again from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. The Grass Grows Where I Am, an incredible anthology book that we are bringing collaborators together. This book is about wisdom, resilience, empowerment, and enlightenment. Do you want to co-author with us? If you do, go to noahcrane.com or click the link below. And we're back. Wow, Mark, what an inspiring distinctions and story that you've lived. And I do believe God is completely using your story to help others, because if you're watching this, you can't not be inspired by what you've been through, and you break it down so nicely for people so they can really get the picture of what you were going through at that time,
Yeah.
and the fact that you just took control of your life and decided that you needed a change for yourself. And anybody can do that by, eliminating or taking care or killing a part of them that no longer serves them, which you did incredibly well. So my question to you is, how has physical fitness changed your life?
Well, it's a very quick thing that can happen, and it's a system of rewards, right? It's a conditioning that can occur within a mindset of physical training. And the most valuable one for me that started occurring very, very quickly on that first swim, honestly, before the guy even said something, I'm swimming, and I remember getting to the deep end, right? And I was scared. I was scared in the deep end because I didn't know if I was going to make it to the wall. And as I was approaching the wall, I remember going, I'm going to kick off this wall, and I'm going to go all the way back. And I didn't believe that I could do it. I did not think that I could do it. But for some reason inside of me, I actually did kick off, and I started going back, and my heart started pounding, and I didn't know if I could make it to the shallow end so that I could get out of the water, right? But all I did, I took one more breath, took one more, handful of water. And then the next thing I knew, I was at the end. I did something that I didn't believe that I could. And every single day after that. So after that guy suggested it, I go, you know what? You're right. If I just swam that lap, you were so right. If you did it, I probably can too. I knew I had gotten sober off of heroin. I knew almost anything was possible, right? So all I had to do was have a little bit of faith. And I knew all I had to do was put one foot in front of the other, and anything is possible. Anything is possible. I've heard so many stories. I love watching the Olympics, right? Because you hear these stories of people overcoming huge adversity to become Olympic athletes, right? And it's so endearing to hear that. And so I knew, I knew that if I could continue to submerge myself in that feeling and that thought every single day, that was changing the whole dialogue about who I was.
Wow, that's incredible. That you just took that extra stroke and just kept going, right? Even though you had that doubt inside of your head, right? Yeah. And sometimes, it just takes that belief, like even if you don't know if you could do it or not, it just that faith, like you said, right?
Yeah.
And how did you find the faith? Do you know how you were able to pull it inside of you? Was it just a mindset, would you say? Or was it a connection to God? Where did that faith come from?
Yeah, I think that, that connection to faith inside of the athletics really started to come rather, I don't know, like objectively. I don't know if that's the right word, but it definitely was less spiritual, right? At that point, I was very anti-religion. I was anti-God. Couldn't even say that word, right? It wouldn't even come out of my mouth. I had been through some very hard things in my early childhood, just really not appreciating the Christian church, especially. So I didn't have any faith per se. And I didn't really know at that point how to believe that good was coming. I didn't know how to like let things go, like, say my truth and then let people feel what they're going to feel. And then, everything's going to work out no matter what, that type of stuff. I didn't know that, but that is an element of faith, right? Knowing that it's all going to be okay. Right. But I didn't have a system of faith. I had a mild understanding that I had none. And that what faith was knowing that everything was going to be okay. Right? So here's what triathlon and fitness in general can do for you. So I'm going through this program. So I download this program, and it's this spreadsheet, and it says swim this, bike this, run this, swim this, bike this, run this, and it outlines it for the next 3 months. And what I recognize is that if I do this, then I will get here. If I do each of these things, then what ends up happening is I have this belief up here that if I do these things, that they're going to happen. But if I continue to do these things throughout the course of this, what am I doing? I'm building faith. I'm building faith that I'm going to get there. I have faith now in a training plan. And so it was a very analytical experience actually for me, where I was just like, oh, all I have to do is trust the training plan. Now, there's things, Noah, that come up in a triathlon training plan that are particularly exciting to go through. Like, for instance, when you've been training for 3 months, about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before an event, you actually pull back training almost to the point where you're not doing anymore. And if you've been doing something for 6 months, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to start doing less, there's this serious emotional feeling of, I'm not going to be able to do this race now if I'm not actually putting out that effort throughout this week. So that first period, that first time before that race, when I actually forced myself to take it slow, to not train, that was the biggest test of my training plan and test of faith. And here's what happened. It was so cool. I didn't think that this could happen. But basically when you're training, you build up to this point where you have this maximum amount of power and strength. So my maximum amount of power and strength on the bike was 250 watts, right? So I'm pushing 250 watts before this period of rest that I'm supposed to go through before the race. It's a 2-week period. And I've built up from 175 watts to 250 watts throughout the season. So I think during this season that when I take this period of rest, I'm going to lose my power. And losing just 5 watts on a bike is like 45 minutes on a course, right? That's a lot of time. So I think that I'm going to lose all of that power, and I go, trust the process. This process is built in science, is built in truth, right? If I trust this process, then it's going to work. So I kind of gave up to it. I gave into it, right? I surrendered to it. And here's what happened. I got out on the race course and I was able to push 275 because my strength increased, and I was all scared the whole time that it was going to decrease. Now, a lack of faith would be me taking control of it based off of my feelings. My feelings are telling me I need to race, I need to go harder, I need to work harder up until the day of the race. But the truth is completely opposite of my feelings. Now, what I'll recognize on race day is very much so the same. On race day, it's all about trusting that your training plan was enough, and that while you go through it, you have so many thoughts. You have so many feelings. You have feelings telling you you're not enough. You're never going to make it. That guy is better than you. You let those feelings glide right through. You don't become any of them. Race is so much a life, right? That's exactly how it is in life. We set our vision on the purpose. We set our vision on spreading God's love, on being a testament of God's love, and then that is our only focus. That's where we just take the next step, and that's all we have to do. And then we have faith about the rest of the stuff all working out, because we've been living this plan appropriately. We've been living with integrity built within our heart. We've been living with gratitude built within our heart. It's part of our being now. It's part of my being that I'm a triathlete. I'm going to make it through this race. It's part of my being now that I'm a son of God and I'm going to make it through this life. And not only am I going to make it through this life, I'm going to touch others in the process.
That's very powerful insight. And, being able to surrender is not easy, to be able to trust. And it seems like you're a very good listener, and you just said, I'm going to follow the process. I'm going to trust. I'm going to follow the process. And the more you follow the process, the more you were able to see your abilities did get stronger, like the process said, then the more you trusted even more. So it's that constant trust you're building within yourself to see that of your abilities to do things that you want to do. And once you do it once, you can do it again.
Yep, and the reinforcement continues.
And it's building that confidence inside of you.
Yes. Yep. And confidence is something that waxes and wanes, right? But there's a decision that's actually really what confidence really is. It's actually just a decision to stand up in the face of fear.
Yeah, and that's not easy for a lot of people. A lot of us crumble in the face of fear,
Until we recognize surrender and until we really recognize faith. So surrendering into something like a training plan for me was extremely easy. And the reason why is actually because I noticed that I had just tried to give up and literally surrender my life. I had just tried to kill myself. That means I was really good at letting go. I was just letting go in the wrong way. I needed to start letting go in a different way.
Right. And realize how your choices, which again, thinking about choices, when I always think about choice, I think, how is this choice right now going to impact me in the long run? Do you ever look at things like that? Like, how is the choice I'm making right now is going to impact me in the future?
Well, yes, and the issue with living in that way, though, is that when fears come, you got to be able to navigate away from those and still kind of go with the heart, and that kind of like comes back to where we started the discussion, the mind and the heart. Or we were talking about that before this discussion, because they do definitely work in concert in that way. Because yes, I do look at the future and think about it, but I also have to go, you know what? It's right in this moment. Because here, whatever's right in this moment is actually not going to detract me from the future plan that's already there in the first place. I've already reached the success. I will not. The only way I will not reach the success is if I start living in fear. Now, in this moment, the action does not actually dictate that success at all. It's the fear that's going to dictate that. Many times during the course of Michael Jordan's career did he make mistakes, but yet he had a winning career.
Right.
And so, yeah, you're gonna be making mistakes, and you got to live on your toes and just becoming. That was a big change in my personality that I changed. Was I wanted to become an action man. So I wanted to start taking action. I was done living a life of inaction, of indecision.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and so when I think too much about the future, it can get slippery. So especially back then, I wasn't thinking much about the future at all. It was just like, just take action, because before you weren't ever taking action.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Taking action is everything.
Yeah.
Because if you're not taking action, you stay left behind, right?
Yeah.
Because life is moving forward. Everything's moving forward. The days, the hours, the years. But
Yeah.
if you're not taking action, you stay left behind. And it can't feel good being left behind, When I said about that is more as far as like when I make choices, I think about long-term impacts of
Yeah.
the choice. Because, choices we make can impact us long-term.
Yeah, and let's remember this too. I'm coming out of a 9-year heroin addiction,
Yeah.
Pill junkie. I didn't have the prefrontal cortex is what's responsible for future planning.
Yes.
That's exactly what's severed in drug addiction, right?
Right.
So remember in my story, we're all not exactly the same, right? The suffering and the philosophy and kind of some of that stuff behind it can be the same, but the exact story that I'm going through is much different, right? Because ultimately, when I start going through this, I'm really like a 5-year-old kid re-experiencing my life, and I've got to find my identity, right? So I've got to just start taking action and kind of bouncing around like a pinball. But the biggest thing there is to have self-compassion, because we're all going to make mistakes, and we all got to just love on each other through those mistakes. I think that's one of the biggest things. Love on each other through any sort of mistake that you're making, and love on yourself through those mistakes too.
Oh, I just want to keep talking to you. And I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I cannot believe this interview ran by. So, Mark, how can people connect with you, find you? I mean, you're such a picture of health. You're doing so many amazing things. I would love to get into what you eat, what you do, how you self-care. I know you're a coach. I know you're a mentor. How can people connect with you and, learn more from you? Get your book.
Yeah. Well, I've got my book and stuff on Amazon. It's called My Suicide Race. It's also on, Walmart and Barnes & Noble, any place you want to find it. I've also got another one called Beautiful Stream Called Life, which is 150 different inspirational mantras. One of my favorite ways to share my heart is obviously through my skincare company. So through my skincare company, it's Halo 42. And a Halo 42 is an upside down rainbow that's only visible at 42 degrees, meaning that the way I love connecting with people is that through your skincare routine, while you're taking care of yourself and while you're loving yourself, you can use that every single day to shift your perspective and develop a new sense of who you are. You can find your hope no matter what you're going through. So that's definitely one of the favorite ways to connect with me, is by engaging with the product and engaging with the full experience of what we call the Halo 42 effect. And that's loving yourself so that you can love other people. And another way to engage with me, obviously, is through Instagram, TikTok, any of that stuff. I'm at Mark A. Turnipseed. So TikTok, Mark A. Turnipseed, LinkedIn, Facebook, everything's Mark A. Turnipseed. And you can also go to www.markaturnipseed.com to check out my podcast, which is called Seeds of Change. And so that one I talk about little itty bitty perspective shifts to create big amounts of change.
I love that so much. And next time we'll have to talk more about the skincare and about your routines and what you do, because I think people are going to love this interview. I've learned so much about you and so much about your journey. And I think it's so inspiring how you've overcome so many things in your life.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the particulars
We'll do that next time for sure. So thank you so much for being my guest today, Mark.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember to have a grateful heart, to ground in love and compassion, and know every day that you're not alone on this journey. Rather, you are guided by God. Check out my jewelry collection, the 3G Effect Jewelry Collection, at noahcrane.com. They remind you to take those 3 actions every day. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Namaste.